Hi, I'm Twisty, bass player for the Reckless Empire. Today we're going to be talking about recording wet and dry bass signals using the Line 6 Helix LT as a digital interface. Just a quick reminder, we post a bunch of gear and music related videos, so don't forget to check out our channel and subscribe. Let's get into recording the bass. In this session, we're going to be using the Yamaha BB734A active passive bass. It's a 4-string bass with a P and J pickup configuration. For the interface, I'm going to be using the Line 6 Helix LT. Mine's configured with firmware 2.82. Connectivity from the guitar to the Helix is via this cable here into the guitar in interface. Connectivity between the Helix interface and the computer, Mac or PC, is done via the USB. Headphones are connected in the headphone jack, and the headphones are configured to monitor for the 1/4 inch output. I use the XLR outputs for live work or analog recording within a recording studio. For digital recording, I'm only going to be using the USB output. Let's have a look at how the Helix is configured for its routing. I start with the guitar interface here. I end up to a multi-output on the right hand side. My signal flow is split into two. I process the bass lower tones through 1 amp configuration, and the higher end I treat differently with a 2nd amp configuration. The amps and configurations I have here are largely based on work that Jon Willis has done from Dr. Tone's secret Helix Lab. There's a link in the description below. I encourage you to have a look at that site and have a look at bass settings for various Helix settings. So I start with the guitar. You can see I've got an input gate noise compression running on that. I split the chain here. The split is just an AB equal split. The same signal goes across both paths but gets treated differently. The first signal on the lower path is a octave pedal. I won't be using that in this session, but it's here shown for what I use for a couple of songs in my live Reckless Empire set. The first amp is an Ampeg SVT4 Pro. It's configured relatively flat. I then run that into a LA Studio Comp stereo compressor. I found I was getting a better tone out of the stereo compressor than the mono. The EQ block has been configured to mimic a JBL 15-inch speaker. This was done by Jon Willis. The second line is the top end, and I'm using the Busy One Channel 2. This again goes into an LA2 compressor, stereo, configured the same as the first one. I'm using a pitch shift here to give a chorusy tone. And again, this line here joins back up with a mixer, equal pan. There's some slight adjustment in volume control to blend the two signals together before they both hit the EQ or the speaker simulator, and I'll then go to the output. You can see that Helix has multiple output types. I'm using multi-output. Now, whilst the recording I'm doing is digital, and that will be using these USB outputs, I'm monitoring the Helix through the headphones, and the headphones are configured to monitor the 1/4 inch. So if I set this all to USB 1.2 for output, then I won't be able to hear anything through the Helix. The XLR I'm using potentially if I'm using into a live recording studio or live on stage, I'm using that. So again, if I have this as multi-output, all of these paths can take the signal and I can monitor them from any of those paths. What you won't see here is USB 7 and 8. USB 7 and 8 is used by Helix to record the dry signal or the unprocessed signal. Imagine having a third line coming through here from the guitar interface with no impact or no effects blocks running on it, and also then going out, but it's going out to line 7 and 8. When we start looking at Reaper and how we're doing the recording, we'll talk more about wet and dry signals. Now let's have a look at Reaper. Reaper is going to be the digital audio workspace, or DAW, and it's where we're going to do the actual digital recording. I'm using Reaper 6.01 on Mac OS Catalina. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add 3 tracks. I'm just going to double click here, and double click again, and double click again to create the 3 tracks. I'm going to select the bottom 2 I'm going to drag them up and to make a folder. I'm going to label the folder base group. The next two, one's going to be for our wet signal or our Helix process signal, and the other one is going to be for our dry signal, or the one that doesn't have any effects or any changes to it. So the first one I'm going to call base wet, and the second one I'm going to call base dry. Now to select the input for these, we need to first arm them. So I'm going to record enable or arm the wet signal and record enable the dry signal. You'll see now there's an input selector. So for the wet signal, I'm going to select stereo as the input. I'm going to choose input 1 and 2. So that means that it's going to come from Helix's output 1 and 2. It's going to come into 1 and 2 here. For the dry, we're going to use USB 7 and 8. So again, I'm going to do a stereo input. I'm going to choose 7 and 8. What this means is I'm going to get a stereo signal which is processed left and right into the wet signal. So my Helix processing goes into this one. And a dry signal which is unprocessed will come through as a stereo signal left and right into this one here. Why would you dry record? Dry recording is an optional component to recording from the Helix. You could get away with just recording the Helix signal as it is. By capturing the second track as a dry unprocessed signal, you're able to reamp later if you change your mind on the signal, or it gives you other options around the mixing in post-production. Recording the dry signal gives you some extra options. I always include it. It doesn't cost any more on the processing. Sometimes I use them, sometimes I don't. Thanks for taking the time to watch. Feedback and questions are always welcome, so comment away below. Don't forget to check out the links for Reckless Empire and our other content below. Also, don't forget to click on subscribe to get more updates. Stay reckless.